For all its beauty and splendor, the wilderness can be a cruel teacher. What makes the mountain beautiful is also what makes it dangerous. Massive sentinels reach the heavens with snow-capped peaks that leave us in awe. But looking from afar is not enough for some. The mountain stands old and patient, waiting for the careless, the unlucky, the ones who believe they can conquer it. Rockfall is a climber's worst nightmare. The big ones don't make a sound until it's too late. You can train your body, you can test your lungs, but no person outruns gravity. You move, you hide, you hope. Some live, some don't. The mountain does not care either way. Let's venture back to the merciless mountains where survival is earned, not given. This is outdoor disasters. For Scott Dinsmore, his Kilimanjaro climb would be catastrophic. Scott Dinsmore was born on October 15, 1983, in San Francisco. From the start, he believed people should chase what set their souls on fire. He studied at UC Berkeley and was drawn to ideas of entrepreneurship and personal growth. The usual path didn't interest him. He worked corporate jobs, sat in meetings, handled numbers, and followed rules. He did what was expected, but none of it felt right. The work drained him. He watched others do the same. Clock in, clock out, exist without passion. He wondered if there was another way. That question became his mission. In 2010, he founded Live Your Legend, a movement to help people build lives around work they loved. His TED Talk, How to Find and Do Work You Love, caught fire. Millions watched. People saw what he saw, that life was too short to waste on things that didn't matter. Live Your Legend wasn't just a website, it was a call to action. A community formed, meetups in 150 cities, strangers becoming allies, helping each other break free from lives that weren't their own. In 2015, Scott and his wife, Chelsea, set out to see the world. 1 year, 20 countries. They met people, learned their stories, and lived as they preached, fully, openly, without fear. 6 months in, they stood at the base of Kilimanjaro. The mountain called to him. He had dreamed of it, trained for it, and wanted to test himself against its silence, height, and unforgiving stone. He had spent his life telling others to push beyond limits. Now it was his turn. Mount Kilimanjaro, a giant rising from the heart of Africa at 19,341 feet or 5,895 meters, is the tallest on the continent. Located in Tanzania, this dormant stratovolcano balances between geologic life and geologic death. The mountain is a gargantuan layer cake of lava and volcanic ash that surged out of faults along the eastern edge of Africa's Great Rift Valley. Kilimanjaro is unique because it stands alone, unlike other peaks that are part of a mountain range. It consists of 3 volcanic cones, Shira, Mwenzi, and Kibo, the summit. The mountain's base stretches across both lush rainforest and dry savanna, while its upper reaches are covered in glaciers and ice fields. No technical climbing skills are required, but the altitude makes it a serious challenge. Volcanic effusions have continued to slather ever more mass onto it. At the same time, rain and snowmelt wash it away. Water freezes and shatters the bedrock. Landslides eat away chunks of it, glaciers abrade it. Despite the challenges, Kilimanjaro is one of the most climbed high-altitude peaks in the world. Thousands of people attempt it each year, driven by its legendary status and the personal triumph of standing on Africa's highest point. Scott and Chelsea Dinsmore chose the Western Breach, a hard route, a dangerous one. Rockfall came without warning, and when it did, there was no mercy. Most guides avoided it. Too many had been lost to the mountain that way. But Scott and Chelsea wanted the challenge. They wanted the silence of the high slopes and the rawness of the climb. They set out on September 10, 2015. Their plan simple: reach Arrow Glacier Camp, rest, then push for the summit at dawn. After a couple of days of trekking up the mountain, they made it to camp. At camp, they met James Baylog, a National Geographic photographer, and his climbing partner Dick Stone and his team of porters. James was a seasoned mountaineer who had seen mountains and the men they broke. He watched Scott and Chelsea, the way they moved, the way they spoke. Our new friends were excited to be nearing the summit, Chelsea especially. We got the impression they were ingenuous to the mountains. They were in awe of our alpine war stories and didn't understand how much harder tomorrow's hike would be compared to the trade routes elsewhere on the peak, he recalled. James was eerily accurate in his assessment. Within hours, disaster would strike on the slopes of Kilimanjaro, shattering the couple's world and altering their lives forever. The Dinsmores awoke early in the morning with a thrill of anticipation, eager to embark on the next chapter of their global adventure. They set out at 3:30 a.m., climbing in darkness, their headlamps cutting thin beams through the cold. The mountain was silent except for the scrape of boots on rock and the slow, steady pull of breath at high altitude. 3 hours in, James, Dick, and their team moved ahead, passing the Dinsmores and their team. They exchanged quick words, "Good morning," and kept pushing up. At 17,000 feet or 5,000 meters, James was working his way up the right side of the funnel, zigzagging to stay out of its center. He glanced down. Scott and Chelsea were 450 feet or 137 meters right in the middle of it, the worst place to be. Then, the sound. A sharp metallic crack, loud and sudden, like someone had hurled a bowling ball into the side of a truck. James stopped. "Holy bleep, what was that?" He didn't need an answer. He knew. Nothing on the mountain made that sound unless it was falling and falling fast. While on the path between Arrow Glacier Camp and Crater Camp, a rock slide was barreling down toward the climbers. I looked up. 1,000 feet or so above us, a huge black boulder, approximately the size of a big SUV, had launched off a cliff. The boulder was airborne and coming straight at us. Smaller boulders were raining down on either side. The metallic bang apparently marked the moment that the expansion of ice in the headwall had split these rocks off the breach headwall. Two decisions followed so fast I would never claim they were the product of conscious thought. They were pure, raw animal reflexes, but reflexes trained by hard-won experience. I saw that the slope we were on was slightly convex, bowed a little bit outward away from the mountain, and that we were a bit right of center. The momentum of the rocks flying off the cliff band pushed them toward our side of the slope. But if we were really, really, really lucky, they might stay more in the center, on the crest of the convexity. There was no other hope. A calm, quiet voice inside my head said, "You're going to die." James moved without thinking, instincts taking over. He lunged right, scanning for cover. The slope was bare. The big boulders had long since tumbled to the bottom, leaving nothing but scattered stones no larger than a fist. Then ahead, a gray rock, 2 feet by 3, small, useless. But the only thing between him and the storm that was about to hit, it would have to do. He threw himself toward it, body airborne, diving for the thin sliver of shelter. As he moved, a voice inside him spoke, calm and final, "You are dying. You will never stand up again." The rock was barely high enough to shield his head. He flattened himself against the dirt, pressing his face into the cold ground, hands locked over the back of his neck. His back and legs were exposed. There was nothing he could do now but brace for impact. Half a second later, the rocks came, a deafening roar, stones hammering down just to his left, a force of nature with no mercy. A smaller one clipped his rucksack and kept going. He turned his head slightly, just enough to see. Black streaks, fast and violent, tearing down the slope, too fast to be seen, too fast to escape. Then, silence. James lifted his head. He was alive. Incredibly, impossibly, so was the rest of his team. But the danger wasn't over. More rocks could fall at any second. To the right, he spotted a tan rib of bedrock just outside the main fall zone. It wasn't much, just a few ledges with walls that might block the worst of what could come next, but it was all they had. "Keep going right. Don't stop, just go. Get on that ridge," he shouted to his team. They scrambled fast, pushing forward, hearts pounding. They had survived, but the mountain wasn't done yet. Meanwhile, down the mountain, Scott and Chelsea were making their way up. The air was thin and brittle. Each breath came in shallow gasps, burning Scott's lungs as he followed Chelsea up the western breach. Chelsea was just above him, steady and deliberate. The breach was no place for hesitation. Every step had to count. Every move had to be sure. Then, the sound. A deep stomach-sinking crack. Not the scrape of a loose stone, not the whisper of shifting pebbles. This was a rupture, a splitting of the mountain itself. Chelsea froze. Scott looked up. Above them, high on the fractured wall, something moved. A cluster of rocks barreling down toward them. Then, the whole world groaned. Scott turned his head just in time to see it break free. A mass of stone tumbling fast, gaining speed, a freight train of death. Chelsea scrambled, pressing herself into the rock face. Scott had nowhere to go. No ledge, no overhang, just a sheer drop behind and the storm of rock above. He ducked, instinctively raising an arm. It didn't matter. The boulder struck him. A sickening, blunt thud. Chelsea heard the sound before she saw it. The way bone gives, the way something once whole is shattered in an instant. A scream caught in her throat. The dust settled in a lazy spiral where he lay. The rockfall ceased, but tragedy hadn't. Scott was on the ground, brutally injured, lifeless after the encounter. I remember the moment of looking back down at him. I think it was the last moment I didn't realize the severity of the situation, Chelsea said. She ran to Scott, who stopped breathing and immediately started to administer CPR. Up the mountain, James and his team were recovering from the near disaster. After a few breathless minutes, a part of my brain was wincing in anticipation of more rocks pouring down any second. We arrived at the ledges. "Are you okay?" we asked each other repeatedly, James recalled. Miraculously, they were all still standing. The big rocks had crashed down just a few yards to the left of where they had been. James turned his attention down the mountain. In the dim, shadowed light of early dawn, it was hard to see what had happened to the other team. Then shapes came into focus, 5 figures upright, clustered together. Below them, farther down the slope, a lone body. Rescue mode. They needed help and fast. James took control of the radio, coordinating with their chief porter Augustin and Doringo. Luck was on their side. One of their walkie-talkies was with a teammate at Lava Tower, thousands of feet below, where the camp was full of Tanzanian porters, strong and fast. Word went out. Men started moving up the mountain. Dick made his way down to the other team. He had trained in emergency medicine just weeks before. If there were a chance, even a slim one, he would take it. James watched as Dick descended. Someone was kneeling beside the body, administering CPR. James felt his stomach drop. Minutes passed. Dick reached the group. James pressed the radio. "What's happening? Head wound?" Dick stepped back from the others, turning away as he spoke. His voice came through the static, quiet. "A head wound would be the least of his problems. I'll get back with you." Minutes later, James called again. This time, Dick moved even farther away before answering. His voice was low, almost a whisper. "It's Scott. He's been very, very badly injured, amputated in fact by the rocks. I had to help them understand that he's dead." Chelsea Dinsmore had been doing CPR on her dying husband. Chelsea was able to bring him back only briefly, but enough to say her final words to him. "I see that moment as a gift, because I had the chance to say I love you," she recalled. When the team at base camp arrived at the site, they had the solemn duty of bringing Scott's body down the slopes of Kilimanjaro. After arranging for the return of her husband's body to U.S. soil, Chelsea and the rest of the Dinsmore family prepped for Scott's funeral and memorial service. The news went worldwide and tributes showered in about the man who left a lasting impact. While Scott perished on the mountain, he left a legacy with his 33 years here on Earth. The visionary behind Live Your Legend, Scott Dinsmore dedicated his life to inspiring others to pursue their passions and live authentically. Through his work, he cultivated a global community that empowers individuals to discover and engage in work they love. His impactful TED Talk resonated with millions, reflecting his commitment to helping others lead meaningful lives. Tragically, Scott's journey was cut short in Mount Kilimanjaro, chasing the very spirit of adventure and growth he encouraged in others. Chelsea took on the role of continuing his vision after Scott's death. However, as of 2024, Live Your Legend is no longer active. But while his time on Earth was brief, The impact of his mission is eternal. His legacy lives on in the hearts of those he touched, dreamers who dared to believe in themselves, people who left behind uninspired careers to chase something meaningful, and communities that formed around the idea that work and passion should never be separate. Scott would say, "If we don't know what we're looking for, we're never going to find it. But once we have this framework, this compass, then we can move on to what's next, doing the impossible and pushing our limits." There are two reasons why people don't do things. One is they tell themselves they can't do them, or people around them tell them they can't do them. Either we give up, or we never start in the first place. The thing is, everything was impossible until somebody did it. The mountain is not cruel. It is not kind. It simply is. Rockfall comes without warning. A force older and stronger than you. A test with no second chances. You cannot stop it. You cannot fight it. But you can outthink it. Stay alert. Watch the slopes above. Listen for the crack, the shift, the sound of something breaking loose. If you hear it, move fast, but move smart. Do not run blindly. Running makes you a bigger target. Instead, get to the side, out of the fault line. If there is shelter, a boulder, a ledge, a crevice, use it. Make yourself small. Get low. Cover your head and your neck. Rocks don't care where they land, but you care where they hit. Do not climb under loose cliffs. Do not stop in gullies. The mountain does not warn twice. Travel early, when the cold holds the rock in place. As the day warms, the ice melts, and the mountain wakes. That's when it falls. That's when men die. But if you respect the mountain, if you watch, if you move with purpose, you give yourself a chance. And in a place where survival is never promised, a chance is everything to navigate. An outdoor disaster. If you've made it this far, please consider clicking those subscribe and like buttons. Want more outdoor disasters content? Check out these videos I believe you'll enjoy. Thank you for watching.